Hey guys, tonight we're gliding into a world of shadowed archways, citrus trees blooming in quiet courtyards, and the soft crunch of sugar underfoot like sand. You're barefoot. The tiles beneath you are cool, geometric, impossibly clean. And the air? It's thick with orange blossom and a faint dusting of cardamom. If you breathe too deeply, you'll probably sneeze yourself into another century. This is Moorish Spain, or Al-Andalus, if you want to be fancy. And tonight, we're going to wander, not rush, wander through the long-forgotten history of its sweets. Syrupy, spiced, fragrant, sometimes heretical, always delightful. The kind of desserts that can make a person whisper poetry in a language they barely understand. But fair warning, this might be the gentlest, slowest sugar crash in podcast history. You probably won't survive this episode with your eyes open. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start at sunset because, obviously, there's no better time to feel dramatic than when the sky is melting over the Sierra Nevada mountains. You're in Granada, yes, the Granada with Alhambra, and yes, it really is that pretty. The kind of place where pigeons look posed and fountains burble like they've rehearsed it. Everywhere you walk, the world smells edible. Not in a someone's baking bread kind of way, but in the I think the walls might be made of honey and rose water kind of way. It's floral. It's spiced. It's oddly inviting, like being followed by a pastry chef with boundary issues. The Moors, Muslim settlers from North Africa, had arrived centuries earlier, and they didn't just bring military strength or stunning architecture. No, they brought flavor. Bold, experimental, deeply fragrant flavor. You're not eating just to fill your belly. You're performing a cultural ritual, a religious gesture, or sometimes a casual flex to impress the neighbors. Historians still argue whether sweets were truly a staple of everyday Moorish life or reserved for elites and festivals. But let's be honest. If you're blending rose water with sugar and almonds, it's not exactly quick Tuesday breakfast energy. You pass a street vendor. Yes, we're still in your dreamy historical mind palace. He's ladling what looks like molten amber into tiny wooden molds. It's Kateef, sort of like a stuffed pancake's decadent cousin. He flips one in the air. You catch it. You burn your fingers. That's how you know it's authentic. Mainstream history tells you that sugar production exploded under Islamic rule in the Iberian Peninsula. The technique had traveled from India through Persia and into the Arabic-speaking world, eventually landing in places like Cordoba and Seville. Before sugar, people sweetened things with honey, which was nice, but also sticky and bee-adjacent. Sugar changed everything. It was cleaner, more precise, easier to store, and let's face it, way more addictive. And this wasn't just sugar as an ingredient. It was an industry. Enslaved labor, massive irrigation systems, and supply chain longer than your last quick grocery run to IKEA. Sugarcane required water. So cities like Valencia and Murcia saw fields of green stalks spring up, drinking up all that sweet irrigation from aqueducts and cannons engineered centuries ahead of their time. But back to you. You're in a courtyard now. There's a fountain. There's definitely a cat staring at you from under a fig tree. Ignore him. You're watching a young girl roll little balls of something golden and sticky in crushed pistachios. She offers you one without looking up. It tastes like dates in heaven. The recipe is simple. Mashed dates, a touch of sugar, maybe a whisper of cinnamon or clove. The kind of sweet you could keep in a pouch while traveling through desert landscapes. Practical, but also weirdly luxurious. Portable decadence. Quirk alert. Some sources say that early versions of halwa, yes, that squishy dense block of sweetened sesame or flour paste, were believed to have spiritual benefits, like eating halwa might make you wise or increase your memory, which means somewhere, probably in Cordoba, someone failed an exam and blamed it on stale halwa. Ancient students, they were just like us. You wander on. Evening deepens. Lamps flicker on with a warm saffron glow, casting patterns against the walls that look like they were drawn by bored angels with perfect penmanship. A scholar walks by, mumbling about sugar being a hot and moist food in humoral theory. Yes, in medieval medicine, sugar wasn't just a treat, it was prescribed. If you had too much phlegm, eat something sweet. Too much bile? Maybe try a fig-stuffed pastry and a nap. Modern nutritionists are probably crying into their kale bowls right now. You're getting drowsy now. Or maybe it's a sugar crash from your mental KTF. Either way, your pace slows. You pass a tiled doorway. The arch is inscribed with a poem that rhymes. Of course it rhymes. About syrup and longing and someone named Layla who probably goes to the poet back in 1024. Somewhere in the distance, a muezzin calls out the evening prayer. The sound folds over the rooftops like a blanket, soft and distant. You pause, listening, breathing in that honey-thick dusk. This is how the evening ends in Moorish Spain. With sweets on your tongue, poetry in your ears, and the quiet sense that the world is secretly made of almonds and beauty. You drift along moonlit cobblestones now, and the night presses in soft and warm, like a blanket that smells faintly of cardamom. Your fingers are still sticky from that date sweet. You wipe them on your tunic, but somehow they got stickier. That's just sugar magic, you decide. Physics will never explain it. You arrive at a low archway, duck under, and enter the courtyard kitchen of a grand Andalusi home. And just like that, you're part of the bustling heart of Moorish culinary genius. Not some dusty museum. This kitchen is alive. Women in layered silk and linen stir copper pots with long wooden paddles, whispering recipes you're probably not supposed to hear. A teenage boy in the corner grinds almonds like he's trying to win a personal feud with a mortar and pestle. The smells are dizzying. Cinnamon, orange zest, ginger, musk. One dish smells exactly like a perfume counter. Another, weirdly, smells like breakfast. You're not sure which is which, and you're too polite or intimidated to ask. The head cook, clearly the Beyoncé of the operation, points to a simmering pot and mutters something about zalabia. That's your cue. You peer into it and see golden fritters bobbing around like chubby little boats. Their deep-fried dough soaked in syrup, and you're told they must be eaten warm or not at all. One of the kitchen apprentices offers you a bite. You take it. Instant sugar joy explosion. Somewhere, your pancreas whispers a tiny scream. Now, mainstream history notes that dishes like zalabia trace their roots back to Persia and the Levant, having arrived in Iberia via trade, conquest, and general cultural osmosis. But while the Moors imported much, they also innovated. The local ingredients, saffron from La Mancha, Valencian oranges, wild almonds, transformed even the oldest recipes into something distinctly Al-Andalusi. And here's the quirky bit. In some homes, these sweets weren't just food, they were part of household rituals. On Thursdays, for example, families might make special confections to mark the start of the weekend. Some accounts even describe candies being used to tell fortunes. Picture this, an elderly aunt inspecting pastry bubbles like tea leaves and whispering, "You'll marry a merchant with excellent raisins." Romance was different. But what makes this culinary moment even more surreal is the poetry. Yes, poetry. Someone recites verse as they stir syrup. Someone else hums lines about sugar lips and velvet eyes. You look around expecting a lute, but no, it's just part of the vibe. Dessert and poetry hand in hand. Sweet things were never meant to be eaten silently. Historians still argue whether this obsessive pairing of food and poetry was standard or elite extravagance. Some say the educated upper class indulged in literary salons with sweet trays. Others believe even modest homes sprinkled a little rhyming on their baklava. Honestly, wouldn't the world be better if your cinnamon rolls came with a couplet? The head cook now spoons out something paler, creamier. It's layered with slivered almonds and speckled with crushed rose petals. You blink. Is this early medieval ice cream? Sort of. It's a chilled milk pudding called muelabia, one of the older dishes on record, adapted from earlier era traditions. No Dairy Queen cone swirl here, just rice starch, milk, sugar, and patience. You're told it cools the body, balances heat. That whole humoral medicine thing again. Remember, sugar was medicinal back then. There were actual treatises arguing that a good syrup could ease chest pain, sore throats, and heartbreak. Okay, not heartbreak, but honestly, Muellabia might be trying its best. Another scholar breezes through, robes fluttering, nose deep in a manuscript. He mutters about sugar being classified as moist in the second degree. You nod solemnly, pretending to understand what on earth that means. Here's a fringe tidbit to tuck away. During certain festivals in Cordoba, people use to build entire edible displays. Pastry walls, sugar sculptures, candied fruits shaped like animals. It wasn't just for show. You were supposed to eat the decor. Imagine biting into the centerpiece at your cousin's wedding and realizing it's a pomegranate stuffed marzipan dove. You've peeked. Outside the kitchen, someone clangs a bell. Not an alarm, just an invitation. Dessert's ready. You're ushered into a narrow courtyard where mosaic tiles glitter under oil lamps and the night air carries music on its back like a lazy river. You're handed a plate. On it, maycrud, diamond-shaped pastries made of semolina and stuffed with dates. They're crunchy on the outside, soft and tender inside, kissed with orange blossom syrup. Your brain short-circuits for a second. You consider proposing to whoever made this. The woman next to you nods, as if to say, yeah, that one hits different. More sweets circulate. There's something called facas, early biscotti-like cookies, sometimes spiked with anise or sesame, built for travel and long chats. People nibble and sip mint tea, giggle, argue about the perfect clove-to-cinnamon ratio, all while licking syrup from their fingers like it's a sport. You lean back, drowsy, trying to absorb it all. The laughter, the low hum of lute strings, the way the night hangs like a silk curtain between your ears. This wasn't just about sugar. It was about warmth, hospitality, a shared language of flavor, humming across centuries. And as you let your eyelids fall halfway, a child dashes past with sticky fingers, clutching a candied figure. He turns and grins at you. The fig looks suspiciously like it's been dipped in saffron. You have questions, but you're too content to ask. Your feet shuffle forward, slipping back into soft sandals as you leave the courtyard kitchen, your breath sweet with the ghost of maycrud, and your pockets mysteriously heavier. Perhaps a few stolen facas tucked in for later. No one saw. Or if they did, they're too sugared out to care. You wander toward the market district, following the sound of water trickling from marble fountains. Each step echoes off alabaster walls etched with curling Arabic script. And as you move, you begin to understand something. Moorish Spain wasn't just about sultans and scholars in those dreamy tile courtyards. It was also about trade, busy, sweaty, cinnamon-dusted trade, the lifeblood of the empire. And at the heart of it all, sweets. You reach a caravanserai where merchants are unloading sacks of saffron and crates of dried fruit, their mules snorting indignantly, like they're offended by the price of almonds this year, which they might be, to be fair. Now, here's the mainstream fact of the moment. Al-Andalus was a trade superhighway in the Middle Ages, especially under the Caliphate of Cordoba. Goods came pouring in from North Africa, the Middle East, and even as far as India and China. You didn't just get sugar, you got perspectives, spice blends, almond varietals, citrus trees that could pass for royalty. A box tips open and spills dried apricots across the floor like tiny golden pillows. A merchant groans. You help him pick them up one by one, resisting the urge to pop one in your mouth. He's muttering something about a delayed shipment from Damascus. Apparently, they're waiting on a particular kind of nut-stuffed nougat that's supposed to be shaped like a falcon. You pretend to nod wisely as if you, too, are annoyed by the absence of artisanal falcon nougat. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some sweets were designed not just to be eaten but to carry messages. Literally. There are whispers, slightly toasted by time and imagination, of candy being used as covert notes. A sugared almond could hide a tiny love letter. A pomegranate seed, dyed just so, might signal a prearranged secret. Were these real espionage tactics, or just romantic myth-making? Historians still argue whether any of it ever happened, or whether it was just poetry working over time. Either way, you kind of love it. Someone gestures for you to try a sweet new to your dreams. A laju, a thick, chewy bar made with breadcrumbs, honey, nuts, and spices. It hits your teeth like a memory from childhood, even though you've never tasted it before. It's wrapped in a pressed fig leaf that somehow tastes like the sun. This one is popular in both Islamic and Christian kitchens. A sugary ceasefire wrapped in wax paper. You bite again. More honey. Always honey. The Moors adore honey, not just for its taste, but for its healing qualities. Before refined sugar was widespread, honey was queen bee of the sweetening world. Honey mixed with vinegar. Honey with herbs. Honey baked into cakes, so dense they could double as building materials. There's even record of honey being poured over roast lamb, a dish you're not sure qualifies as dessert, but you make a mental note to try it anyway. As you meander through stalls strung with lanterns, you overhear a debate between two pastry makers. One insists cinnamon should never touch clove. The other gasps as if slapped. This is serious business. Recipes here are inherited like titles. To tweak a family's sweet is basically culinary treason. One merchant lets you sample a rose-flavored jelly so delicate it wobbles like it has stage fright. You're told it's called rat al-hokum, a sort of early Turkish delight. When you ask what's in it, she smiles cryptically and just says, "Dreams." You don't press further. And now a side path, slightly off the sugar trail. You find a scroll vendor nestled between a syrup merchant and a boy selling candied citrus peels from a silver tray. The vendor unrolls parchment after parchment, some filled with poetry, others with diagrams of kitchen tools. One illustration catches your eye, a blueprint of a 10th century sugar mill, complete with gears, pulleys, and a little person running what looks like a very confused donkey. Moorish Spain, it turns out, had an entire sugar processing industry, especially near Valencia and Granada. The technology, some of it imported from Egypt and Syria, was advanced. Water wheels powered presses, and massive cauldrons boiled cane juice into thick syrup before it crystallized into something precious. Yes, sugar was basically a controlled alchemy project. You take another step, and suddenly you're in a courtyard bakery, where the air is warm and lazy with the smell of semolina dough. A baker sprinkles sesame seeds on the flat discs of dough destined to become catif, folded pancakes stuffed with sweet cheese or nuts. He offers you one and raises an eyebrow. You want cinnamon or pistachio? You panic and whisper, "Both." As you chew, he grins. Wise. In the corner, a young girl reads a story aloud as she stirs a pot of honey. Something about a fox who tricks a lion into making pudding. You don't really follow, but the honey smells incredible and the fox seems clever, so you nod in solidarity. The baker whispers another fringe detail in your ear, like he's revealing a scandal. "Did you know," he says, "they used to flavor sweets with musk and ambergris?" You blink. "Whale perfume," he clarifies. People loved it. You imagine explaining that at a modern bake sale. These cupcakes are whale-based. Whether that flavoring was common or just a luxury for the elite is, you guessed it, still debated. Some sources swear even ordinary folks could occasionally score a hint of musk if a traveler passed through town. Others claim only the caliphs would dare scent their custard with whale bling. You lick syrup from your lips and lean back against a tiled wall, watching the last apricot sunrays disappear behind the rooftops. A cat jumps onto a windowsill, tail twitching with suspicion, probably jealous of your pistachio catif. The evening deepens and the market glows like a field of lanterns. Someone begins to sing, not a performance, just a melody meant for the dough and the night. You hum along. It's starting to feel like you live here. Like this sugary, spice-kissed dream is your address now. And maybe it is. The moon slips higher now, trailing behind it the scent of rose water and warm pastry. You move through the quieting market, past flickering lanterns and sleepy-eyed vendors packing their wares, until the city opens up to the wider world again. Fields beyond, hills that glow silver under starlight, and somewhere, beyond your view, a stream murmuring secrets to the olive groves. You walk a little slower, like you just left a party you didn't want to end. But the road ahead promises more delights. Tonight, you're being pulled toward the sugar fields of Moorish Spain. Yes, sugarcane didn't just show up in a jar one day. It had to be grown, nurtured, harvested, squeezed, boiled, and blessed with enough patience to make even the calmest cook cry into their syrup. In the 10th century, especially in regions like Motril and Malaga, sugar plantations flourished under the watchful eyes of engineers and farmers. The Moors brought sugarcane cultivation techniques with them from the East, Persia, Egypt, and earlier Islamic empires. They knew how to irrigate the tricky Spanish soil, how to rotate crops, and most crucially, how to make sugar not just a crop, but a business model. You pass through terrace fields now, ghost fields in the moonlight, where rows of sugarcane once stood like soldiers made of sweet. The leaves whisper above your head, as if remembering old harvest songs. You reach a small mill, a replica maybe, or just a stubborn remnant of something grander, and hear the faint creak of wooden wheels. Water rushes beside you, not in fury, but with purpose. The Moors were experts at managing water. They built acequias, those long, narrow channels that twist across fields like ribbons. These irrigation systems, designed centuries ago, still work in parts of Spain today. Not bad for pre-Google engineering. You crouch beside one now, trail your fingers to the cold stream, and imagine workers by torchlight guiding oxen in circles, turning wheels, crushing stalks into pulp. Sticky, exhausting work. And dangerous, too. Those presses didn't care much for fingers. You wince in sympathy at a memory you don't have. Here's your mainstream fact. By the 12th century, the sugar industry of Al-Andalus had grown so large that some regions were exporting their syrup across the Mediterranean. Traders loaded onto ships bound for Italy, North Africa, even France. You're not just nibbling on old sweets. You're walking to the bones of the global economy, sugared and spiced. And now for something stranger. There's a lingering debate among scholars. Did sugar production in Moorish Spain influence the eventual systems of plantation agriculture in the New World? Some argue yes, that the techniques and hierarchical labor structures developed here laid the groundwork. Others push back, insisting the similarities are surface level at best. Still, it's a thread that ties sweetness to sorrow, sugar to empire, one that's easy to overlook when your mouth's full of honeyed almonds. A shadow moves beside you. Don't worry. Just a shepherd heading home, humming something low and tuneless. He carries a fig basket and offers you one. You thank him, bite into it. It tastes like sunshine and grit. You ask if he grows any cane himself. He laughs and says, "No, but I drink the molasses when I get sick." Sugar as medicine again. The theme persists. You walk together a while, down toward a coastal road where ships once bobbed in syrup-sticky ports. He tells you stories. Not all sweet. One about a nobleman who taxed his village in sugar instead of silver. Another about a boy who fell into a vat of boiling syrup and survived with a limp and the world's stickiest nickname. The shepherd stories blend fact and fiction until you can't tell which is which. But that's the point, really. History here isn't tidy. It's smeared like jam across a slice of time. And just when you think you've scraped it clean, you find another bit hiding in the corner. Here's your quirky detail. Sugar wasn't just eaten. Sometimes it was worn. Wealthy citizens might dust their skin with perfumed sugar powders. Others coated their lips in sweet balms made from syrup and beeswax. There are rumors of brides with sugar crystal eyebrows, though historians still argue whether those were real trends or just poetic exaggerations. Either way, it sounds deeply impractical, but also kind of fabulous. You part ways with the shepherd as he turns down a footpath lit by fireflies. The coast opens before you, and somewhere nearby, you hear the clank of metal and the hiss of steam. A sugar refinery. Late at night, it works without rest. You peek through a gap in the wooden wall. Inside, glowing cauldrons bubble with golden syrup. Workers stir with long rods, their faces streaked with sugar ash. A master distiller walks past you, mumbling ratios and muttering about temperature shifts. You follow at a respectful distance as he checks the syrup's thickness with a flat spoon. He dips, lifts, watches it fall. Not too fast, not too slow. He nods, satisfied. Alchemy achieved. This is where syrup turns solid, where golden liquid becomes jagged sugar crystals in earthen molds. The final step in a transformation that began months ago in sunlit fields. And the crystals? They don't look like anything fancy, just pale brown chunks. But back then, these were treasure, luxury. Some households locked them in small boxes and only brought them out when guests arrived. Sugar wasn't just a flavor. It was status. You sneak a pinch off a tray and let the shard melt on your tongue. It's smoky, warm, and not nearly as sweet as modern sugar. More complex. more patient. Outside, the night deepens. The wind carries the scent of the sea and something caramelized. You wrap your cloak tighter, not from chill, but from the strange intimacy of it all. You're walking through sweetness, yes, but also through power, labor, invention, and longing. Every bite from that market tray carries centuries of hands, hopes, and maybe just a little bit of mischief. You press on, the moon fat above, your pocket still a little too full, and your eyes beginning to droop. The sugar still clings to your fingertips as you leave the refinery behind, brushing them absently against the fabric of your cloak, like someone trying to let go of a dream that's left a bit of residue. Your steps carry you inland again, through a whispering corridor of cypress trees. The moonlight dapples the dirt path, and somewhere in the distance, a nightingale does its best impression of a lovesick flute. You're headed toward a kitchen now. Not just any kitchen, but the kind tucked inside a noble Andalusi estate. Maybe it's the 11th century, or maybe time's a bit blurry by this point. But either way, you're about to peek into the room where sugar, spices, and absurd levels of patience turn into the kind of desserts that made conquerors swoon and poets weep. The kitchen smells like cinnamon and warm almonds. A mortar thuds rhythmically as someone grinds pistachios. There's honey cooling on marble slabs, and a young cook, barefoot and humming off key, rolls thin dough into spirals tighter than a sleeping cat. This is where the real magic happens. Not in battlefields or courts, but here, elbow deep in crushed nuts and rosewater syrup. Here's your mainstream historical fact. During the height of the Caliphate of Cordoba, especially in the 10th and 11th centuries, aristocratic kitchens became culinary laboratories. Moorish chefs had access to ingredients from across the Islamic world. Dates from the Levant, saffron from Persia, and sugar from local plantations. They developed refined dessert techniques centuries before French pâtissiers thought to fold butter into dough. And no one's throwing powdered sugar on a donut yet, but you can sense it coming. Now, as the young cook stirs a thick almond paste over low flame, you notice how he moves with careful reverence. This isn't just food, it's artistry, and, in some cases, prayer. He tells you in passing, while not looking up, that this is for a wedding tomorrow. The bride asks for malmol filled with orange blossom cream and dusted with cinnamon. The groom requests a katayef stuffed with crushed pine nuts and dipped in syrup. He grins. He said he'd trade his horse for them. That's romantic or deeply impractical. Possibly both. The room is hot, the air sticky with effort. Baskets overflow with dried figs and dates. Earthen jars labeled in beautiful Kufic script line the shelves. You're not sure what all the labels mean, but you recognize saffron, anise, fennel, and, yes, cinnamon again, like an old friend who never left a party. Here comes your quirky tidbit. Some of these cooks compose their own dessert poetry. Yep, rhyming couplets about syrup viscosity, almond textures, or the elegance of a well-folded pastry. Imagine a chef reciting lines like, "Thy filo flake, a silken breeze slashed with pistachio soul and honeyed teas," while stirring custard. Honestly, Shakespeare could never. But there's also a debate simmering here. And no, it's not about whether the custard needs more rose water. Historians still argue whether these refined confections were eaten by the general public or reserved solely for the elite. Some claim sweets like these were found even at modest feasts and seasonal festivals. Others insist these recipes, recorded in luxurious manuscript cookbooks, were far removed from the average palate. Who's right? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe the truth is floating somewhere in the middle of a syrupy dream. You reach for a warm cake. Just one because you're polite, and it collapses delicately in your mouth. Cardamom, almond, a puff of orange essence. It tastes like a secret whispered by someone who's very good at keeping secrets. As the cook works, a scribe enters the room. Yes, a scribe. In the kitchen, he's been tasked with recording the recipes for a noblewoman's household archive. He sits quietly in the corner, his reed pen scratching across parchment as he observes the cook's movements. When the cook pauses to taste the syrup, the scribe pauses too. There's something oddly touching about that. The scribe shows you a page. It's titled Kitab al-Ab, the Book of Dishes. That's right. Cookbooks existed. Even then, some were deeply practical. Others leaned philosophical, offering guidance on the spiritual benefits of moderation in sugar. Yes, moderation. As you lick syrup from your lips. He turns a page and reads a line aloud. You don't speak the original Arabic, but the translation reads, "Let not the dough rise too proud, for the almond within is humble. A little pastry's in, if you will. It's getting late, or early depending on your angle, and the kitchen begins to wind down. The fire dims. The almond paste is tucked away like a precious scroll. The cook, still humming, finally sits and dips bread into a small dish of grape molasses. You sit beside him. Neither of you speaks. There's no need. Outside, the stars feel heavy, like they're pressing gently on the roof. You lean back. Let your fingers trail over the tile floor, and remember a time you thought dessert was just a category on a menu. Now you know better. Dessert is geometry, history, poetry, politics, and sugar, of course. Always sugar. And just before sleep finds you, the cook turns and asks softly, "Did you try the almond rolls?" You nod. "Good," he says. They remember more than we do. You're not sure how long you've been sitting on the floor of that kitchen. Your back warm from the hearth, your hands still sticky with honeyed dreams. But you rise now, quietly. Maybe no one notices, or maybe they just pretend not to. Either way, you slip out through the courtyard, where shadows from lanterns flutter like moth wings across the mosaic tiles. The moon is even higher now, and the breeze carries something unusual. The faint, perfumed scent of candied flower petals. You follow it. You arrive at a walled garden behind a noble house, a place so still it might have been poured from a teapot and left to settle. Olive trees lean with gossip. Lemon trees drop their opinions at your feet. And there, tucked under a lattice of vines, are the ladies of the house, seated on cushions, their fingers brushing against porcelain trays of, what else, sweets. They're not eating much. It's more like they're remembering the sweets as they eat them. One of them waves you over with a smile that says, "You might as well sit. We've seen your type before." She plucks a violet-colored morsel from a tray and places it in your palm. It looks delicate enough to shatter, if you even think too loudly. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The refined courts of Moorish Spain, especially in Al-Andalus, prize floral desserts. Edible flowers like rose, orange blossom, violet, and even jasmine were crystallized, infused into syrups, or distilled into flavorings for pastries. These weren't afterthoughts. They were considered peak elegance. Sweets didn't just taste good. They had to look like poetry and smell like the gardens of paradise. In fact, gardens themselves were carefully cultivated as living metaphors for the Islamic concept of Jannah, or heaven. So when someone served you a rose water pudding under an actual blooming rose bush, it wasn't just on brand. It was a brand. The violet sweet melts on your tongue, and suddenly everything around you slows. The air feels thicker, as if time's been folded over like a delicate crepe. One woman points toward a small tray and says, "Try that one. It's called Zart Al-El, the Night Blossom." You oblige, because saying no would probably offend not just her, but every jasmine flower from here to Damascus. Now for your quirky tidbit. One Andalusi dessert was said to use distilled iris root for aroma, but not for flavor. Iris was believed to be calming to the nerves and mood-enhancing, though it tasted like chalk dust. The cook would extract just enough essence to scent the syrup, but not so much that it made the dessert taste like a Victorian perfume bottle. This was sugar as subtle suggestion, not sledgehammer. Imagine being so extra you sent your syrup with trace floral oils for the vibes. They ask where you're from, and you answer, though it doesn't really matter here. Someone else pours mint tea into a glass, so thin it trembles when touched. The man who brought the sugar today, one woman begins, says he saw a monkey eat a pomegranate, and then demand a second. You blink. Are monkeys picky now? Oh, yes, she says. The second one had to be colder. There's laughter, soft, low, like night wind rustling fig leaves. A cat weaves through the cushions and sniffs the sweets, entirely unimpressed. You offer a petal. It ignores you. Classic. But it's not all whimsy and roses here. You overhear a quieter conversation behind you. Two older women, dressed in deeper shades, are debating the origin of a particular syrup. One says it came from Baghdad, brought by merchants with dates and new spices. The other insists it was born here, in Cordoba, invented by our grandmother's grandmother's grandmother. This brings us to tonight's scholarly bickering corner. Historians still argue whether certain Moorish sweets were local Andalusi innovations or imported from other parts of the Islamic world. Some recipes in Arabic cookbooks seem to be direct copies from older Eastern texts, just with swap ingredients. Others have no traceable origin, suggesting regional flair and experimentation. Did these desserts travel westward through trade routes, or did they bloom spontaneously in the kitchens of Granada and Seville like culinary orchids? Honestly, the debate's still marinating. A third woman chimes in, offering a compromise. Maybe the syrup came from Baghdad, but the patience came from here. Everyone nods. That sounds right. You take a final bite of a sugar-dusted rose confection that crumbles like the first frost, and you wonder how something so small can carry so much ceremony. This isn't a snack. It's a history thesis you eat with your fingers. You rise again. One woman slips a tiny candied orange blossom into your pocket with a wink. For the road, she whispers, as if you're heading into a storm instead of a dream. The garden gate creaks behind you, and the night air swallows the scent of sugar and spice. You wander through narrow alleyways now, where the walls are so close your shoulders nearly graze them. Lanterns flicker above, swaying with a hush of unseen footsteps. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls midnight, or maybe it's the echo of a copper pan hitting a countertop. Same rhythm, same ring. You pass a closed shop with sugar figurines in the window, tiny camels' towers, and one that looks suspiciously like a flamingo in a turban. Beside it, a faded sign promises saffron syrup for melancholia in the most elegant calligraphy you've ever seen. You're not sure if the shop's real or just a sugar-induced hallucination, but either way, it's oddly comforting. You keep walking. The streets are emptier now, but not lonely. There's something about this part of the journey, post-dessert, pre-sunrise, that feels like an exhale. You pass another window. Someone's baking kashkananaj, those spiced, fried crescent pastries with sesame and honey. The scent brushes against your neck like a goodbye kiss. And just before you fade again, you think, if paradise exists, it probably smells like this and keeps a warm tray by the door. The night stretches on, soft as a silk ribbon unspooling across the hilltops. You drift through the outskirts now, where houses become orchards and orchards melt into fields. The stars overhead are fat with gossip, blinking lazily like they've been watching the same sugar trade routes rerun for centuries. Somewhere ahead, a lantern bobs. You follow, half curious, half entranced, because clearly you're the kind of person who trusts floating light sources in historical dreams. The path winds to a low, whitewashed building tucked beside a sleepy grove of pomegranate trees. There's a wooden cart parked out front, its shelves dusted with flour and something glinting. Could be sugar, could be starlight. The air here smells different. Less floral, more toasted. A little nutty. And unmistakably, decadently buttery. Inside, 3 men kneel over a long table, whispering instructions to one another as if building a ship from pastry. Their hands move with precision that's half monk, half magician. You watch, silent, as layers of impossibly thin dough are stretched, brushed with clarified butter, and stacked like ancient scrolls. Then comes a filling. Ground almonds, cinnamon, sugar, and a secret they definitely won't tell you. One of them looks up and grins. Baklava, he says, motioning for you to sit. Not baklava. Not yet. This is the ancestor, the proto-pastry, the Moorish invention that tiptoed through Andalusi kitchens centuries before it became a cafe cliché. This version is lighter, crispier, with more spice and less syrup. You take a piece. It shatters like old parchment and leaves a film of sweetness on your teeth. You blink once, and suddenly you're seated beside them like you've been part of this kitchen since the caliphate fell. Now here's your mainstream historical morsel. Sweets like baklava were brought to Al-Andalus by cooks and merchants from the Eastern Islamic world, particularly from regions like Persia and the Levant. Over time, these recipes were adapted with local ingredients, like Andalusian almonds and Iberian cinnamon, creating a unique fusion cuisine that later influenced European desserts. The baking techniques, though, those stayed pure magic. While you're chewing, the man to your left tells you about his grandfather's almond museum. You nod slowly, hoping that's not a mistranslation. He collected every type, he explains. Bitter, sweet, wild, roasted. He even had one carved into a flute. That, you decide, sounds entirely reasonable. There's something about almonds in this world that demands reverence. Like each one contains a tiny poem. They start folding more pastries, and you see a tray labeled sambasak. Those are for the mosque, someone mumbles. Crescent shape, filled with dates or spice meat. Sometimes even sugared cheese. You ask how they choose the filling, and the youngest baker shrugs. Depends on who's confessing. That brings us to tonight's friendly academic disagreement. Historians still argue whether the desserts of Moorish Spain were more influenced by Arab, Persian, or North African culinary traditions. Some claim the backbone of the sweet kitchen was Arab, carried westward through conquest and migration. Others argue that the true soul came from Persian delicacy and North African ingenuity, especially Berber traditions that relied more on honey than sugar. The recipes often overlap, and written records weren't exactly standardized. So you're left with fragments, old verses, and the occasional kitchen ledger that's more poetry than math. A pot of syrup boils quietly in the corner. Sugar, rose water, orange blossom. You glance in and swear you see a miniature city reflected in the surface. One of the cooks notices and nods solemnly. That happens sometimes, he says, as if cities appearing in sugar pots is just a normal Tuesday. They offer you another piece, this one twisted like a seashell and dusted in powdered sugar, so fine it leaves tracks on your fingertips. You eat it, of course. Resistance is for amateurs. While the pastries bake, someone brings out a curious little book. The pages are brittle, but the ink smells like cloves and wine. Inside are sketches of sweets, most of them you recognize now. Spiral fritters, nut pyramids, hollow sugar domes that would collapse at the sound of a sigh. But others are more bizarre. A candied eggplant that looks like jewelry. A marzipan camel with licorice reins. And something labeled suckery at al-Mumtaza, which appears to be a pie filled with sweet rice and fish. You raise an eyebrow. The baker shrugs. Historians argue whether that one was a prank. The timer rings. Well, not a timer exactly. More like a copper bell tapped with a spoon, and trays emerge like royal proclamations. You watch as the pastries are arranged into geometric patterns on lacquered platters, each shape echoing the tiles and patterns found in the mosques and palaces of the region. Even dessert here follows architecture. The door swings open, and a group of women enter, chattering quietly. They're here to take the trays. One for the bathhouse, one for a wedding, and one, oddly, for a chess club. You glance at the checkerboard pastries and wonder what kind of match they're snacking through. You help them carry the trays out into the street, balancing one carefully like it's a crown. As you walk, the heat from the pastries warms your hands, and the scent trails behind you like incense. A child runs past and tries to snatch one. You dodge. The pastry survives. You feel like you pass a test. You arrive at the hammam first. It's late, but inside, laughter and steam roll like clouds. A woman accepts the tray with a wink and says, "Best way to end a sweat." Honestly, she's not wrong. The wedding is next. Musicians are warming up, flutes, drums, and someone practicing what sounds suspiciously like a kazoo made of reed. You sneak a second pastry, while no one's watching. It tastes like sugar and survival. Finally, you reach the chess club. They're mid-game, but one player pauses to nod at your delivery. He pops a honey fritter into his mouth, chews slowly, and moves his rook. You suspect the pastry helped. And then, you're alone again. The cart is gone. The street is quiet. You sit on a worn stone bench and lick sugar from your fingers, watching as a stray cat saunters by, clearly unimpressed by your journey. And somewhere in the distance, a new scent curls into the night air. Fried dough. You're not done yet. The scent of fried dough teases your nose like a mischievous child running through a sunlit courtyard, just out of reach. You follow it as if it's a secret breadcrumb trail, laid out specifically for you. The streets are quieter now, the moon higher, shadows deeper. Your footsteps echo softly on the cobblestones as you wander toward the source. Your senses sharp, but your body pleasantly heavy with the warmth of the night and too much honey-coated pastry. The smell leads you to a small, bustling stall set up near the riverbank. Flames flicker beneath a large, shallow pan filled with bubbling oil. A man with soot-streaked hands flips discs of dough with practiced ease, pulling golden rounds from the fryer and laying them on a rack to drain. The air is thick with the smell of frying dough and the subtle perfume of orange blossom water, sprinkled over the freshly cooked treats. You step closer and watch as the man sprinkles a dusting of powdered sugar mixed with crushed cinnamon over the pastries. He smiles at you and offers a piece, still warm and crisp, the kind of simple joy that never goes out of style. These are zalabia, deliciously light, honey-soaked fritters that have been enjoyed in Moorish Spain for centuries. Here's a fun historical tidbit. Zalabia has its roots deep in Middle Eastern culinary tradition, but quickly became a beloved street food in Al-Andalus, especially during festive occasions like Ramadan. The dough is simple, but the magic is in the frying and the soaking in syrup, a perfect marriage of textures and flavors. As you munch, the man tells you that these treats were once considered a luxury only for special celebrations. But over time, everyone from royalty to market vendors came to savor their sticky sweetness. There's even a legend that zalabia were served to the famed philosopher Averroes during his late-night study sessions. Because, apparently, even medieval intellectuals needed a sugar rush. You sip on a small cup of spiced tea, its warmth a gentle counterpoint to the sweet fritters. The tea's aroma mingles with the scent of the river and night blossoms, wrapping around you like a soft blanket. The man then shares a curious detail. In some regions, zalabia is made with a little yeast to puff it up, but in others, it's unleavened, giving it a denser texture. This subtle difference sparks debates among food historians and enthusiasts. Historians still argue whether the yeast-leavened version originated in Al-Andalus or arrived later with influences from North Africa. You watch as families gather around the stall, laughing and sharing stories over plates piled high with zalabia. Children chase each other with sugar-dusted fingers, their cheeks flush from the night air and the sugar high. It strikes you how food, even something as simple as fried dough, can weave communities together across centuries. A stray cat weaves through the legs of the crowd, hoping for a dropped crumb or two. You remember the cat from the last pastry stop and wonder if it's following you or just really likes sweets. The man dips another fritter into the honeyed syrup and hands it to you. You bite in, the crisp shell giving way to a warm, tender center, its comfort wrapped in a sugar hug. As you savor the last crumbs, your thoughts drift to the layers of history baked into these sweets. The migrations, the trade routes, the mingling of cultures that made Moorish Spain a culinary crossroads. And just as you think this journey might be winding down, the man leans closer and whispers about a secret recipe, one passed down through generations, said to contain an ingredient so rare it's almost mythical. A spice that could only be found in the farthest reaches of the empire, guarded jealously by traders. You lean in closer, the quiet crackle of the frying pan and the soft murmur of the night wrapping around you like a cozy blanket. The man's eyes glint with the thrill of a secret well kept, the kind you imagine passed down in hushed tones beside glowing hearths. He speaks of saffron, the golden thread spice harvested from crocus flowers, delicate, precious, and just a pinch enough to transform these humble fritters into something fit for a sultan's banquet. Saffron wasn't just a flavor. It was a symbol of wealth and prestige in Moorish Spain, more valuable than its weight in gold. Traders would cross deserts and seas, their camels laden with the precious stigma threads, while bakers and cooks jealously guarded their saffron sachets like hidden treasure. You can almost feel the tension in the air, the spice's aroma teasing your imagination. That scent alone could elevate any sweet from simple to sublime. The man's story drifts toward how saffron began to appear in recipes beyond sweets, coloring rice dishes, stews, and even perfumes. This little golden spice wasn't just about taste. It was about prestige, status, and the interplay of cultures in Al-Andalus. You imagine the palaces where Moorish nobles hosted lavish feasts, the air thick with exotic aromas, where saffron's vibrant hue in their dishes was almost as important as the taste itself. As you let this sink in, your mind wanders to the more mundane side of bakers' lives. The hustle of daily bread making, the pounding rhythm of kneading dough, the sharp tang of yeast. You think about the baker's early mornings, long before the city wakes, with hands coated in flour and faces glowing from the heat of ovens. The sweet treats were a reward, a festive twist on the staples that kept cities fed. But life wasn't all golden spices and festive sweets. You hear murmurs of how bakers dreaded Mondays. Why Mondays? Because after the weekend, when everyone indulged and markets buzzed, the bakers faced a grim task of cleaning ovens caked with the week's crumbs and burnt sugar. No one wanted to sweep up sticky messes or wrestle with stubborn dough residues while nursing a hangover from too much zalabia and mint tea. Here's a quirky detail. Some bakers had a superstition that Mondays were unlucky for baking, so they performed small rituals, like tapping their ovens with a wooden spoon or sprinkling salt around the kitchen to ward off bad luck. Historians still argue whether these rituals had genuine spiritual meaning or were just an excuse to delay the dreaded cleaning duties. You can almost picture a tired baker muttering under his breath, rubbing flour-streaked hands, glancing at the dusty ovens and dreaming of the next festival when zalabia and saffron treats will be celebrated again. The night's quiet is interrupted by the laughter of children running past, sugar-dusted and carefree. You realize these sweets, these simple fritters, are threads in a larger tapestry of daily life and ritual, joy and labor, taste and tradition. And as you savor these thoughts, a soft breeze carries a scent of orange blossoms and honey, mingling with the spicy warmth of saffron and cinnamon, a sensory lullaby from centuries past. Your eyes drift to the edge of the courtyard where an old woman stirs a pot with deliberate slowness. The light from the fire dances across her weathered hands, each movement precise, like a song she's memorized over a lifetime. You draw closer, the aroma pulling you in. This time it's almonds, roasted and sweetened, crushed into a paste and molded with orange blossom water. She hums to herself as she works, shaping little domes of marzipan, the almond sweet that Moorish Spain quietly passed down to modern Europe. These weren't the cloying Christmas marzipans that show up in supermarket tins. No, these were soft, nutty, perfumed delicacies made to echo the balance of earth and flower, of tradition and innovation. The woman sprinkles them with a dusting of rose sugar, pausing to nod at you knowingly. You imagine her younger self, perhaps standing where she does now, watching her own grandmother do the same thing. These recipes were oral heirlooms, passed not on parchment, but through fingers and tongues, through practice and memory. Historians still argue whether these almond-based sweets originated in Persian kitchens or North African souks, but by the time they hit Toledo, they were distinctly Andalusi. One curious twist: some recipes call for ground chickpeas instead of almonds, an economical switch when almonds were scarce or hoarded by the rich. So if your marzipan tastes slightly beany instead of nutty, you stumbled upon the peasant version, though honestly, both versions can knock you into a sugar coma by sundown. You wonder about the almond harvest, gathered in baskets, shelled in courtyards, spread to dry in the sun. The smell must have clung to everything. Little children running by with sneak kernels, earning gentle scolds from mothers who needed every last nut for the coming feast days. And then there's the love angle. Did you know almond sweets were often used as romantic tokens? A young man might leave a little marzipan dome outside the home of someone he fancied, tucked in a folded scrap of embroidered cloth. There's even a lesser-known legend about a baker's apprentice who stole a royal recipe just to woo a palace servant. It worked for about 2 months, until the marzipan ran out, and so did she. You chuckle softly to yourself, imagining someone getting dumped over stale sweets. The old woman sees your smile and offers a warm nod. It's not just a treat. It's a memory, a story in sugar. Beyond the courtyard, bells toll in the distance. You trace the echo to a mosque that once stood, then became a church, then maybe a museum. Structures, like recipes, evolve, collapse, rebuild. Yet some things, like the scent of almonds in the air, persist. You return to the almond paste, watching it cool in neat little rows. Everything here moves slowly, and not because of some sleepy haze, though that certainly helps. It's the rhythm of a place that once prized patience. Sugar took hours to refine. Spices had to be imported, pounded, and sifted. Even water had to be drawn from gardens engineered with such poetic geometry that historians still argue whether they were designed more for aesthetic pleasure or irrigation practicality. You reach for one of the sweets, and as you do, you notice a faint etching on the ceramic plate beneath it, a swirling pattern of vines and stars. Art didn't stop at the food. It was in the bowls, the tiles, the brass trays that caught the candlelight. Everything was curated for sensory harmony. Even the tea, the tea, came spiced with cardamom, sometimes steeped with mint and sweetened so thoroughly it could double as a syrup. A fringe detail? Some sweet makers believed that if you stirred sugar in one direction only, clockwise, mind you, it would keep away bad omens. No reversing, or the whole batch would be ruined. It was serious business. You wonder how many ruined batches were just undercooked disasters masked as the spirits didn't like this batch. The old woman begins clearing her space, sliding the sweets into a wooden tray that smells faintly of cedar. She moves slowly, contentedly, like someone whose entire evening has been spent in quiet service to joy. And so you linger, surrounded by almond-scented calm, as the night stretches deeper into velvet. The kind of velvet that carries stories in every thread. Somewhere in the stillness, you hear the faint crunch of sugar crust beneath someone's boot, and that's your cue to follow the scent of caramelizing honey. It drifts in warm ribbons from an open-air kitchen where brass pans simmer with golden syrup. You're not quite sure what's cooking, but it smells like nostalgia, sweet, warm, and slightly nutty. Tonight, it's a laju, a sticky, chewy delight made from crushed nuts, honey, breadcrumbs, and a trace of spice. You lean in as the cook stirs a bubbling mess with a flat paddle, then quickly spreads it onto thin wafers, pressing them down with what looks like an ancient iron paperweight. There's a kind of sacred urgency in the motion, as if the perfect texture depends on precisely how bored your arm feels from all the stirring. Historians still argue whether a lodger was originally a Moorish invention or a Christian adoption with Moorish flair. Either way, its ingredients speak of the confluence that defined Andalusian cuisine: almond from local groves, breadcrumbs from yesterday's flatbreads, and honey from bee colonies once tended near Cordoba's hillsides. There's even a variety that includes wine must, yes, reduced fermented grape juice, just to make your dreams more fragrant and medieval. The cool part? Some versions of a laju were medicinal. They'd add herbs, thyme, lavender, even a pinch of ground poppy, to supposedly aid digestion or ease melancholy, which means that eating sweets to fix your mood isn't just a modern invention. It's historic. You feel slightly vindicated for that emergency fudge run last Thursday. The chef next to you mutters something about timing and heat, and suddenly a pan hisses dramatically, splashing syrup onto the stones. He curses under his breath, then sighs. It's a dance, this whole business. Not just chemistry, but memory. Each batch depends on the weather, the humidity, your mood, and maybe the alignment of Mars. You watch as he slices the cooled slabs into tidy squares, stacking them like edible playing cards. Each one is sandwiched between round wafers, which sometimes double as edible packaging. You pick one up, still warm, sweet, just a little gritty with crushed seeds and nuts. It tastes like something your great-grandmother might make if she were part apothecary, part sugar fairy. As the night deepens, the kitchen grows quieter. The heavy copper pans are scrubbed and set to dry, their bottoms charred from years of fire. You catch sight of a child peeking around the corner, hoping for a spare corner of a laju. The chef relents with a grunt, offering the smallest square and watching it vanish into delighted cheeks. It's a gesture older than any recipe book. You linger there, wondering about the ancient sugar trade, how entire caravans once wound their way through deserts and mountain passes, just to bring sweet crystals to the Iberian Peninsula. Historians still debate whether the Moors introduced sugarcane farming to Spain or merely improved existing systems, but by the 10th century, places like Granada and Murcia had thriving sugar economies. Fun fact: there's a weird little side note from an early chronicle that claims sugarcane fields were guarded by monkeys trained to screech at thieves. Is that true? Probably not. But now you're picturing a tiny monkey in a fez screaming at a guy with sticky fingers, and honestly, it's delightful. The moon is higher now, casting long silver shadows over the courtyard. You step away from the cooling sweets, past a pair of wooden sandals left beside a bench, and into another tile hall. This one's lined with mosaic patterns in blue and green, under which you swear you can hear the soft humming of a lullaby. Perhaps that's just your mind dozing at the edges. Another table, another suite, this time it's Sephardi Turin, a softer, moister cousin to the hard nougat you're used to. made with egg whites whipped to a froth, sugar gently boiled at just the right stage, and toasted nuts that always seem too beautiful to eat. You've entered a world where patience isn't just a virtue, it's a key ingredient. These confections, you learn, often blur religious lines. Though rooted in Muslim kitchens, many sweets pass into Jewish and Christian households, each tweaking them slightly to meet their own needs and laws. During certain feast days, they were the stars of the table, though the actual stars were probably just ceiling lanterns twinkling after too much date wine. And oh, the dates. They show up everywhere, blended into paste, rolled in sesame, baked into little pockets of dough like sugary secrets. Dates were staple in luxury, base in beauty. Their presence tied these sweets to dessert traditions, to camel trains, to the lush oases that somehow always sound imaginary but weren't. You chew on that thought, literally and figuratively, savoring the sweetness, the spice, the faint crackle of honeycomb between your teeth. The Moorish sweet makers knew what they were doing, and they probably knew how to nap, too. Honestly, they had the better end of history for once. You walk now along a shadowy arcade of fig trees, where moonlight filters through the leaves like lace, and the scent of roasted sesame drifts up from somewhere close. The path beneath your feet is soft with crushed petals and almond shells, and a breeze nudges your curiosity toward another hidden courtyard, one that hums softly with clattered tin trays and the low lull of conversation. Here, you find yourself among women. They're seated on woven rugs, sleeves rolled high, their fingers quick with dough and honey. Some are whispering prayers. Others are arguing, gently, over whether the saffron should go in before the rose water or after. You're clearly interrupting something sacred, but no one seems to mind. You're handed a little pastry shaped like a crescent moon, warm, fragrant, suspiciously light. This is kaike or kak, depending on who's telling the story. A dough ring that comes in at least a dozen varieties, some sweet, some spiced, some so dry you wonder if it's a punishment disguised as dessert. The ones tonight, though, are dreamy, filled with crushed nuts and cinnamon, brushed with egg yolk, and covered in sesame seeds so generous they practically form a second crust. Historians still argue whether kaike originated in Moorish Andalusia or was a Levantine immigrant snack that caught on during religious festivals. What we do know is that these little rings of joy often appear during Eid celebrations, but also manage to sneak their way into Christian and Jewish households, especially in secret. Imagine hiding your cousin's forbidden cookies behind a potted fern just to keep the local inquisitor from side-eyeing your snack choices. You bite into one and are momentarily overwhelmed by the contrast. Crunchy, buttery crust giving way to soft, crumbly center, then the whisper of orange blossom. It's not overly sweet. It's balanced, complex, the kind of pastry that reminds you life wasn't always about sugar highs. It was about sharing ritual and occasionally getting into passive-aggressive fights about cardamom ratios. Across the courtyard, a girl is using a mold to stamp intricate patterns onto more of these moon-shaped cookies. They're so detailed, they look like they belong in a museum. Some historians suggest that these molds were passed down generations, each design tied to a particular family, region, or even wedding dowry. So, yes, your grandmother's cookie cutter collection could have once been a status symbol. You sit, just for a moment, and listen to the kitchen gossip. There's talk of a merchant who brought back dried apricots from Persia, of a nun who allegedly reverse-engineered a Moorish sweet in her cloistered kitchen and then claimed divine inspiration. One woman snorts and rolls her eyes. You're not sure if she's annoyed or just amused. Either way, the pastry she hands you is a tiny, perfect triangle that tastes like almond dreams. It's called samsa, paper-thin dough, folded over a sticky nut filling, then deep-fried and drizzled with syrup or powdered with sugar. Yes, it sounds like baklava's younger, sassier cousin. And you're right. The overlap is real. Moorish sweets often borrowed from Eastern Mediterranean traditions, but they made them smaller, spicier, and more portable because sometimes your conquest schedule didn't allow for full dessert forks. The triangle crackles between your teeth, and you swear the rose water lingers on your breath like a whispered poem. It's hard to focus now. The air is warm, the lights are dim, and the rhythmic sound of trays being stacked creates the perfect sleep soundtrack. But before you drift too far, you're ushered toward another table. This one is dominated by a glistening, translucent loaf. It looks like something between Turkish delight and Jell-O, with a few scattered almonds trapped inside like prehistoric bugs in amber. You poke it, it jiggles. You blink, it jiggles again. This is ma, a lesser-known jelly sweet once thickened with starch or even fish glue. Yes, fish. Sorry, not everything in the past was gourmet. Some versions used gum arabic. Others relied on the natural gelatin from boiling animal bones. Either way, it was a texture game and a show of wealth. If your dessert wobbled just the right way, people noticed. In a good way, usually. Historians still argue whether this jelly-based dessert had medicinal origins or was simply a byproduct of trying to one-up your neighbor's pudding. There's a 12th century tale of a sultan who demanded his ma jiggle, like the sea under moonlight. That's either a culinary standard or an early food influencer's caption, but it stuck. You nibble a corner and are surprised. It's light, perfumed, almost refreshing. There's a sweetness that doesn't cloy. Just drifts like jasmine in the heat, like a half-remembered song. It tastes like patience and silk slippers and someone's grandmother who never once wrote a recipe down. Someone offers you mint tea, and honestly, it's the only thing keeping your eyes open at this point. The sweetness has slowed your heartbeat to a comfortable thud. The night around you smells of orange peel and worn stone, and the faintest trace of clove smoke. You walk slowly now, past quiet fountains and abandoned mixing bowls, past sugar-dusted counters and flour footprints that disappear into the dark. It's hard to believe that some of these recipes, these little bundles of honey, nut, and history, barely exist anymore, lost to time, or folded too neatly into newer traditions. But you've tasted them now. You've watched them made, felt their stories stretch out across centuries. And there's more waiting. Just one more courtyard. One more candlelit room of sweetness and sleep.